Good morning, guys. I miss y'all. Shout out to those that are doing their work. I've been seeing people consistently working on their schoolwork, and that just makes me really happy to know that some of y'all during all this mess are continuing to try and do things normal. So shout out to y'all. I appreciate y'all. Okay, so we're starting chapter 4 today, and chapter 4 is titled Plundering Germany. So Louis is, from the last chapter, we know that Louis ended up qualifying in the finals. He wasn't even mentioned as a competitor for the finals in the 5,000 because he had never run the 5,000 before in a meet. He had only run it before he qualified for the Olympics. He had only run it 4 different times, and that's crazy that he only had run this race 4 times and yet made it to the Olympics in the race. So this is Louis' passport. So he's about to go to Germany for the Berlin Olympics. If you know anything about Germany during this time, and I posted some video links in the slides today that go along with the questions, but there's some links to the Berlin Olympics. This is the Olympics where Hitler is in charge of Germany before he really starts trying to take over different countries. Okay, so chapter 4, Plundering Germany. As we read, look for themes, social issues. I've noticed that a lot of people are on their homework are not really putting down social issues. I put down examples, but y'all need to come up with some examples that you see from the text. Example, I wrote down a social issue here that I saw from this first part. Theft is a social issue. Okay, all right. Chapter 4, Plundering Germany. The ship bearing the Olympic team to Germany wasn't long at sea before Louis began stealing. In his defense, it wasn't he who started it. Self-conscious about being a teenage upstart, he at first curbed his cultish impulses and began growing a mustache, but he soon noticed that practically everyone was souvenir collecting. The mustache was abandoned, and Louis joined the other lifelighters in denuding the ship. On the pitching seas, training was chaotic. Basketball players did passing drills on the deck, but the wind kept jettisoning the balls into the Atlantic. The water in the ship's pool sloshed back and forth so violently, and big swells of water heaved the water and everyone in it onto the deck, so the coaches tied the swimmers to the wall. Imagine trying to practice for your Olympic event on this ship. I mean, the sea is pitching so much that the people that are in the pool are getting thrown out of the pool. Gymnasts fell off their apparatuses. Fencers lurched all over the ship. Louis and the other runners trotted around dodging deck chairs. On the high seas, they all staggered in one direction and then the other. For a poor kid accustomed to stale bread and milk for breakfast, the ship was paradise. The food and beverages were everywhere in amazing abundance, and Louis ate everything. Think about, Louis grown up in a Great Depression era where he hasn't really had a lot of food. And think about, if you've ever been on a cruise, think about how much food is on a ship. In the dining room, he plowed through anything that the seasick athletes couldn't stomach. Discovering a shot putter with a tiny appetite, he began sitting beside him, dropping onto his plate like a vulture the moment that the shot putter was full. On the first-class deck, he found a window in which pints of beer kept magically appearing, and he made them magically disappear. One night, Louis jotted down what he had just eaten. Look at this list of what he had eaten. That's a lot of stuff. 1 pint of pineapple juice, 2 bowls of beef broth, 2 sardine salads, 5 rolls, 2 tall glasses of milk, 4 small sweet pickles, 2 plates of chicken, 2 helpings of sweet potatoes, 4 pieces of butter, 3 helpings of ice cream with wafers, and 3 chunks of angel food cake with white frosting, 1.5 pounds of cherries, 1 apple, and 1 orange. That's a lot. Biggest meal I ever ate in my life, he wrote. Where it all went, I don't know. He soon found out. When the ship docked, the doctor weighed Louis, and in 9 days he had gained 12 pounds. The Olympic Village was breathtaking. Nestled among the forest and lakes were 140 beautiful cottages, a shopping mall, a barber shop, a post office, a dentist office, a sauna, training facilities, and dining halls. A new technology called television was on exhibit. Imported animals bounded over wooded trails. Someone wondered aloud where storks were, and the next day, 200 storks magically appeared. Louis and other Olympians were driven through Berlin for the opening ceremonies. Adolf Hitler and his militaristic, ferociously anti-Semitic Nazi party were in power. Anti-Semitic means that you're against Jews. So his anti-Semitic Nazi party were in power, and their presence was everywhere. Swastikas papered the city. Soldiers drilled and military gliders swooped over oceans of uniformed kids called the Hitler Youth. Gypsies and Jewish students had vanished. The gypsies dumped into camps, and the Jews confined in the University of Berlin campus. The only visible sign of chaos was the broken glass in the windows of the Jewish businesses. Entering the Olympic Stadium, the athletes were treated to a thunderous show, culminating with the release of 20,000 doves. With the birds circling in panicked confusion, cannons fired, prompting the startled birds to relieve themselves in a shower over the athletes. Louis stood at attention, shaking with laughter. As Louis prepared for his race, he knew that he had no shot at winning a medal. It wasn't just that he was almost pudgy from idleness and overeating. Few nations dominated an Olympic event as Finland did in the 5,000. Finn Lauri Lietman, the 1932 gold medalist, was back, along with his swift teammates Gunnar Hockert and Ilmari Salomon. Louis was too young and too new at this to beat the Finns. His day would come, he believed, in the 1500 and 1940. So Louis already realizes when he goes that he's probably not going to get a medal because he's young, he's overeaten on the boat, and this event is dominated by people that are much better than him because they've had a lot of practice. An envelope arrived from Pete. Inside were 2 playing cards, a joker and an ace. On the joker, Pete had written, "Which are you going to be, the joker," which is another word for a horse's rear end, "or the tops, the ace of spades? Take your choice." On the ace, he had written, "Let's see you storm through as the best in the deck." On August 7th, Louis lay in the Olympic Stadium infield, readying himself for his race. 100,000 spectators ringed the track. Louis was terrified. He buried his face in the grass, inhaling deeply, trying to settle his nerves. When the time came, he walked to the starting line, bowed forward, and waited. At the sound of the gun, Louis's body, electric with energy, wanted to bolt, but Louis made a conscious effort to relax. As the pace setters surged forward, he kept his stride short. Don Lash emerged with the lead, the 3 Finns behind him. Louis settled into the second tier of runners. So Louis, as they're running, Don Lash and the Finns are at the front, and Louis kind of hangs in the middle, close to the back. Louis smelled a sickening odor, the hair pomade, so the hair gel of a runner ahead. Feeling nauseous, he slowed, letting the pomade runner pull away. The laps wound by. Remember, there's 12. The laps wound by, and Louis kept losing ground. Lash and the Finns were slipping out of reach, and Louis wanted to go with them, but his body felt heavy. He slipped into 12th place. And this, I've got some pictures. The 751 is Louis's running number that was pinned on him during the race. And then this right here, these are the people that are in the race, and here's Louis right here. He looks like he's about to pass all of them. So remember, he's in 12th place. Ahead, the Finns sidled into Lash, roughing him up. On the 8th lap, Solomon rammed his elbow into Don Lash's chest, and Lash folded abruptly in evident pain. The Finns bounded away. They entered the 11th lap together, looking to sweep the medals. Then for an instant they strayed too close. Their legs tangled, and Solomon fell heavily on the track. His race, like Lash's, was lost. But Louis saw none of this. He passed Lash, but it meant little. He was tired and so far behind. He found himself thinking of something Pete had once said. A lifetime of glory is worth a moment of pain. Louis thought, let go. So that right there, guys, that sentence that Pete told him, a lifetime of glory is worth a moment of pain, that right there is an example of a theme that is stated outright. This is one of the biggest themes that is a part of Louis' story, especially in the beginning. So that is stated outright for you in the text. So he lets go. With 1 lap to go, Louis fixed his eyes on the gleaming head of the pomade runner far ahead. He began a dramatic acceleration. Around the turn and down the backstretch, Louis kicked, his legs reaching and pushing, his speed dazzling. One by one, runners came up ahead and faded behind. As Louis flew around the last bend, Hockert had already won. Louis wasn't watching him. He was chasing the glossy head still distant. He heard a roar and realized that the crowd was cheering him on. Even Hitler watched him. Louis ran, Pete's words beating in his head, his whole body burning. The shining hair was distant, then closer, then so close that Louis again smelled the pomade. With the last of his strength, Louis threw himself over the line. Louis had clocked by far the fastest 5,000-meter run by an American in 1936, almost 12 seconds faster than Lash's best for the year. He had just missed 7th place, so Louis finishes 8th. But he ran the fastest 5,000-meter for the entire year for the United States. As he bent, gasping over his spent legs, he marveled at the kick that he had forced from his body. If you don't know what kick is, in track, when you're finishing, like especially in distance, they tell you to kick, which means to give your last amount of effort, 100%, when you come around that last curve at the finish line. But Louis started his kick earlier, and he was able to maintain it and run at 100% speed all the way to the end. So he's pretty amazed at himself. It had felt very fast. 2 coaches hurried up, gaping at their stopwatches. In the 1930s, elite distance running, it was exceptionally rare for a man to run a last lap in 60 seconds, even at a mile. In the 5,000-meter, well over 3 miles, a final lap in less than 70 seconds was astounding. Louis had run his last lap in 56 seconds. So imagine you've run 12 laps or 11 laps and you're running that 12th lap and you run it in 56 seconds. I don't know about y'all, but my fastest time running a lap ever was 64 seconds. And that was, 67 seconds. I wasn't that fast at running a full lap. I was distance. So could you imagine finishing a lap in 56 seconds around a track? It's crazy. After cleaning up, Louis climbed into the stands near Hitler's box. Someone pointed out a ghoulish man, and it was Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's minister of propaganda. Louis, who knew nothing about the Nazis, had never even heard of him. He carried his camera to Goebbels and asked if he'd snap Hitler's picture. Goebbels asked his name and event, then took the camera, moved away, snapped a photo, and returned. Hitler, he said, wanted to see him. Goebbels led Louis to Hitler. The Fuhrer bent from the box, smiled, and offered his hand. Louis had to reach far up, and their fingers barely touched. Hitler spoke. An interpreter translated. "Ah, you're the boy with the fast finish." Itching to raise Cain, Louis donned his Olympic dress uniform and went out with a friend. They prowled the bars, sarcastically chirped "Hail Hitler" at everyone in uniform, and stole anything that they could pry loose. In an automat, they discovered German beer, and by the time that he'd finished his second liter, Louis was feeling very brave. Trolling around Berlin, they stopped at the Chancellery, the building that housed Hitler's office. A car pulled up, and out stepped Hitler, who walked inside. On the building, Louis spotted a Nazi flag that he thought would make a great souvenir. The banner didn't carry much symbolic meaning for him, or many other Americans in 1936. Louis just had a hankering to steal in his head and 2 persuasive liters of beer in his belly. Watching the guards pacing before the Chancellery, Louis noted that on each pass there was a point at which both of their backs were turned to the flag. As they turned, Louis ran to the flag and began jumping, trying to grab it, but the guards spotted him. So Louis tries to steal a flag from Hitler's where his office is, and the guards spot him. Louis took a last step, snagged the flag's edge, and fell, tearing the banner down with him. He scrambled to his feet and ran like mad. He heard a crack. He looked back and saw a guard running at him, his gun pointed up, yelling, "Halt! Stop!" Louis stopped. The guard spun him around, saw his Olympic uniform, hesitated, and asked Louis his name. The one thing that Louis knew about the Nazis was that they were anti-Semitic, so he gave his name in an exaggerated Italian fashion. The guard summoned an official who asked Louis why he had stolen the flag. Louis, laying it on thick, said that he wanted a souvenir of the happy time that he had had in Berlin, Germany. The Germans gave him the flag and let it go. The press heard of Louis's adventure, and reporters took creative liberties, saying Louis had stormed Hitler's palace to steal the flag in a hail of bullets. Plunging 18 feet, he'd raced away, pursued by 2 groups of guards who tackled and beat him. It was just as a rifle butt had been about to crush Louis's head, the German army's commander-in-chief had halted the attack, and Louis had talked the general into sparing his life. In one version, Hitler himself allowed him to keep the flag. Louis had done it all, went to the story to win the heart of a girl. So they're telling all these fantastic stories about Louis. They're making up all these lies about Louis and how he stole the flag and are reporting it to the press. So here's Louis and here's that guard. When Louis arrived in Torrance, he was plunked onto a throne and paraded downtown, where 4,000 people, whipped up by a band, sirens and whistles, cheered. Louis shook hands and grinned. "I didn't only start too slow," he joked. "I ran too slow." As he settled into home, he thought about his future. Running in the 1936 Olympic 5,000 at just age 19, on only 4 races experience, had been a shot in the dark. But running in the 1940 Olympics, so 4 years later, he's like, but if I run 4 years later in the 1500 at 23 years old, after years of training, it's going to be another matter. The same thought was circling through Pete's mind. Louis could win gold in 1940. Officials had just announced which city would host the 1940 Olympics, and Louis shaped his dreams around Tokyo, Japan. Okay, so if we're thinking about our central idea for this section, you think about your 5 questions: who, what, when, where, why. And then you put all of those together and create your central idea sentence, starting with the why, so the author's purpose. So the who, obviously, who is this chapter about? It was about Louis. What was the biggest thing that happened in this chapter? Louis does not win in the Olympics. He gets 8th. But he has the fastest lap in Olympic history, last lap, and he begins thinking he could win in 1940. When does this happen? In the 1936 Olympics. Where did this happen? It happened in Berlin, Germany. And the why, the author's purpose is to inform. So you would create a sentence that combined all of those things, starting with the author informs. All right, guys, I miss y'all, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow. Take care.